Hi, I'm Luke Carlson, Ellis Carlson Law. Welcome back to the show. I want to thank my guest, Jenny Carlson, for being on the show as well.
Hi.
And Marty, our producer. Thanks for being on.
Woohoo.
Anytime.
Thank you. Ellis Carlson Law, we represent homeowners specifically against bad HOAs. And Marty brought to my attention, John Oliver of HBO did a whole segment on homeowner associations. I thought that was hilarious. I don't know anything about John Oliver. This is the first time I see it. Marty, how did you find this in the first place? Where does this come from?
It probably came up on a YouTube feed.
Okay.
I need a good laugh every once in a while, and Google picked up on it, so it recommended it to me at one point.
Got it. Yeah, this should be fun. I've never seen this before. Marty, you have sworn by it, so I'm excited to
I don't know.
jump in.
That's a bit extreme. I don't know about
Aggressive.
sworn by it, but I saw it. I laughed through it. You're an HOA attorney. I figured that getting your take on it would be quite interesting.
All right, well, let's jump in. I'm excited.
I'm so pumped.
HOAs, which stands for Homeowners Associations, not, as you might have thought, Horse on Adderall, which I believe is the potential sequel to Cocaine Bear. HOAs also...
Okay, he's on fire.
I already love
He's already
him.
milking just HOA alone.
So sometimes known as community associations, are entities set up to govern groups of homes, like suburban neighbourhood developments or condos, and often make local news as the villains in stories like this.
It's a simple story of a man with some simple needs.
So we're doing a reaction to his reaction to another story. Okay.
It's very meta.
This is like, what was that movie with Leonardo DiCaprio? You know,
Inception?
the one, Inception.
Yeah.
This is the Inception episode.
Down and have his little chips and a soda if he wants, and say hello to some people.
Tanya's talking about her neighbor, Ted,
I'll be 92 in September.
and the bench outside his door.
I have a place I like to come out here and sit and relax.
Notices from his HOA, the Bethany Villa Association.
Where's it from? Is that California, Florida?
It says Arizona.
No,
Arizona.
Scottsdale.
Okay.
Remove your bench from the common area, or it will be removed.
The man deserves a place to rest and enjoy nature and eat his little snacks and say
poor
hello to
Angel.
people and pet puppies.
Yeah, let that man have his bench. He deserves to eat snacks and pet puppies, which is, by the way, the single greatest way you could spend a day. Nothing tops that.
Pet
If on the
the
day that your baby
beef
was
puppies.
born, a friend came and told you that they spent the afternoon eating snacks and petting puppies, they had a better day than you did. The miracle of life can't compete with the simple joy of munching snacks and scratching backs. Nom, 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 nom. And this is true.
Oh my God.
All right, not to kill the mood, though, but it's a common area, so I'm not surprised that the board took issue with it. That's like setting up a your own, like, permanent seating area next to the community pool. Right, common area is common
We
area.
wanted to pet the damn puppy.
No, I know.
Was it-
I'm like Debbie Downer coming in on this one.
Was it in a common area?
That's
Looked
what they
like
said.
It looked like it was right outside of his front door.
It did, but he said common area, at least California. Common area is common area, but let's see where this goes.
Okay, let's see where this goes.
Also, quick shout out to Tanya there. The neighbour billed by that local station as simply Neighbour and Ted fan. She may be a Ted fan, but I, for one, am a Tanya fan because I see the effort that it takes to put on a full
Ted
face
fan.
first thing in the morning and go on the news just to say,
Cheers
stop
to that.
with Ted. But that is not a one-off. Stories of HOAs being petty are legion.
A Valley homeowner says her HOA wants to fine her because she installed artificial grass.
A homeowners association told one San Antonio family their holiday decorations are up too early, so they got to come down.
I got lots and lots of letters from the HOA telling me to stop feeding the ducks.
I mean, when you receive a violation for a tree not being tree-shaped, it boggles your mind.
Yeah, of course it does. Because what does not tree-shaped even mean? If it has branches, bark, and a place for a squirrel to store some nuts and get some it's a tree. It's tree-shaped by definition.
Oh my
The
gosh.
fact is, a lot of people live in HOAs.
Wait, pause this for a second. I want to know, I'm dying. When did that lady put out her Christmas
It
decor?
was in June.
I just need somebody to go back and ask her that.
No, if it's June, God bless the HOA.
Honestly, honestly.
29% of the US population lives in a community association, and it's actually increasingly hard to find a home that doesn't come with one. As of all the new single-family homes sold in 2021, 82% were in an HOA. That's up from around just 40% in 1990, which is pretty remarkable. given that when one local station asked viewers how they felt about their HOA, the results were nearly universally negative, with one notable exception.
This was a rare comment. I like our HOA. I guess I'm the lucky one. But it was quickly followed with, don't count yourself lucky too soon. Every HOA is just one vote away from hellish nightmares.
Wow. One vote away from hellish nightmares is a pretty intense comment. It's also, incidentally, the DNC's sole campaign message for the last 2 elections. So if they are this widely used and this widely loathed, tonight, let's look at HOAs, what they are, what purpose they serve, and the surprising powers they have to wreak havoc in people's lives. And let's start with the basics, courtesy of this old explainer video.
Just what is a community association? The association is a legal entity created as a result of a planned community. A board of directors is responsible for governing your association. Working together with the board members and committee members can ensure that your community will run smoothly and effectively. After all, board members are...
I mean, honestly, that's what they look like.
You have to shake my hand. It's like this. It's the slow.
I know. It's so
that
good.
does it for me.
Owners, just like yourself.
Okay, you can really tell that video is from the 90s, not just because it's shot with a quality that can only be described as after-school porno, but also because the board in question is just 3 men and 1 woman that they all ignore. In other words, almost every 90s sitcom. The point is, HOAs are run by elected boards of your fellow homeowners, and they require the payment of dues, which average around $200 to $300 a month, but can be much more depending on where you live. And in return, the HOA covers upkeep of the common areas and amenities in the neighbourhood, like playgrounds or swimming pools. They also, crucially, enforce architectural and landscaping guidelines like no benches or trees must be tree-shaped, which are often trying to push aesthetic uniformity and preserve property values. You can find HOA rules like homes may display a maximum of 2 exterior decorative objects, or all garage doors must be painted Benjamin Moore Mayonnaise OC 85. And one Arizona HOA required that front yard landscaping must contain a minimum of 1 36-inch box tree, 1 24-inch box tree, 10 5-gallon shrubs, and 10 1-gallon shrubs. And I genuinely can't tell if those are HOA requirements for taking care of your lawn or rules to settlers of Catan. And those rules are...
So I will say, though, I mean, listen, we see the most horrific rules, just draconian in nature, just awful. But, you know, what I tell homeowners before they actually buy into an HOA, just look at the CC&Rs. It sounds like a horrible project, but that's where you're going to start seeing how obnoxious
that's pretty
an HOA
damn
is.
specific,
It's
though.
a good, but it is, but it's a good indication of what you're going to experience, right? If you go into a hyper draconian set of laws, it's not like you show up blindly. You have an opportunity before you buy the house to look at CC&Rs.
Do you think that those CC&Rs were changed over time, or do you think that they were originated with that specific of shrubbery?
I think that was a development. I think that evolved over time. That would be my bet.
If you even look at Talega and San Clemente, there's certain shades of brown your house can be. There's like 1 of 5 shades.
I mean, that's, you know, arguably that is what an HOA does, though. It creates this uniformity. The problem, though, that happens is where you have, you know, an HOA who targets one homeowner, or they start to selectively enforce, right? All their buddies have just wacky colors. One homeowner does as well, but they're the ones who are under the scrutiny of the HOA. That's really where problems happen.
Yeah,
well said.
Look at the opposite. You go to the neighborhoods that don't have an HOA, and it's that one guy with the 2 like Volkswagens that are on blocks there. And,
yeah,
and
100%.
And their house is painted fuchsia.
And the garage is zebra. So I mean, yeah, it's a trade-off. But my point is, you will know before you can actually know before you acquire. That's all I'm saying.
That's an interesting.
As opposed to showing up and saying, "Oh my God, I didn't know that these were the requirements." You can actually like hedge your bets a little bit, but I don't think most people do that.
Aren't just advisory, they are enforced through fines, and HOAs can be pretty unforgiving about handing them out.
Take a close look at Deborah Blue's Wake County home. The color of her shutters had her facing steep fines with her homeowners association.
They decided to fine me $25 a day.
Deborah paid close to $2 grand in fines and took down her plum shutters,
which was immediately met with a response that now they were going to fine me in violation of taking the shutters off the house and start fining me again.
That is absurd. She got fined for the colour of her shutters, took them down, and then got in trouble for the absence of shutters. It's one of those situations where no matter what you do, you lose. Sort of like going on The Voice. Sure, there are technically winners, but name a single one. This show has been on for a conservative 50 years, and not a single winner is a household name. Seriously, tell me the first and last name of just one winner. You can't.
You can name American Idol.
Not even Honky Tonk Frankenstein can do it. And some HOAs
But at least they found their partner. They got
about
married.
actively seeking out rule violators, as this man discovered.
3 years after buying this property, the Henrys received a letter from their homeowners association
saying that they were doing an audit, and they noticed that I had a shed in my backyard and it wasn't approved by my homeowners association.
Gavin, who is a disabled veteran, told the HOA the shed was there before he bought the property, and none of his neighbors have ever complained.
Since you can't see this shed from the front yard and no one came knocking at the Henrys' front door, they asked their homeowners association how they were able to perform an audit.
I'm betting
That's when
drone.
they were told over the phone that Google Maps was used to scope out their backyard.
Yeah, they spied on him with Google Maps, which feels extreme. If you're relying on the achievements of the space program to find out what is in someone's backyard, it's probably not your business. And if you're wondering how HOAs get the authority to do all of this, the answer is they're basically born with it. HOAs are typically created by developers when they build a new neighbourhood. They write the HOA into deed restrictions with membership automatic upon purchasing your home. And they're set up as not-for-profit private corporations that can often function like a local government. Some HOAs handle street paving, snow ploughing, lighting, and run private sewer and water systems, and others even dabble in traffic enforcement.
In the Parkview community in Spring Valley, an HOA board email says they installed this, a speed camera. They say more are coming. Neighbor Ted Morris says what worries him and some other neighbors is how much a violation will cost you for going slightly over 15 miles an hour. The notice says it's $250 for the first ticket, $500 for the second, $1,000 for the third, and any more violations for you and your
applies to guests.
$1,000 speeding tickets given out not by the city, but by the HOA. Basically,
Money grab.
the way HOAs work is they get to set the rules and select the punishment for breaking them.
Can we talk about that for a second?
Yes, hold on. That is wild.
Yeah, I mean, they kind of just...
You're not hosting Christmas Eve at that point.
They're speaking very broadly. You know, there are rules and regulations that don't let them... an HOA can't just act arbitrarily. They can't. You know, they have to comply with the CC&Rs. They have to comply with the bylaws. They have to comply with state regulation. That doesn't mean that bad HOAs disregard all of it. And that happens all the time. They just make willy-nilly rules over here, enforce the hell out of them to everyone's detriment. That happens.
No,
but
they couldn't have just put the speed traps in there without a vote.
Right? It had to be approved.
I don't know what state it's in. It was sort of unclear.
Okay, let's talk about California. How would that work? Would they need a vote to put in speed traps that would ultimately gather?
Yeah, you'd have to go to the governing documents for that one. I think it would be case by case. But something that severe, that over the top, there would be some sort of internal vote, right? It couldn't, in other words, be just one tyrant board member who just wants to put up speed camps.
Because could you imagine?
Now, that's not to say that a tyrant doesn't exist who would do that. But I'm saying if they wanted to comply with the rules, regulations, all the laws that regulate boards, it would have had to go through some sort of procedure. It wasn't like that just popped up overnight with no sort of input from the community.
Okay, good.
And then sorry, because I'm stuck on the shed guy.
You really like it.
Okay. Talk to me about the shed guy.
I'm assuming the CC&Rs are clear as day. You can't have a shed. You can't have some sort of external.
I'm betting that's the case, yeah.
Okay. So... And then the HOA goes out and says, oh, you have the shed, you need to get rid of it. Even if it...
Yeah, so on an issue like that, let's say the HOA for some reason just really got obsessed with sheds. They love sheds, or they love to remove sheds.
Yeah.
And they did this huge investigation into sheds in the community for whatever reason. Maybe it's dropping property values, which I doubt, but it's a violation. It's a clear violation.
You can't even see it from the street.
Yeah, but if the CC&Rs say you can't have a shed,
you can't have a shed.
So in order to investigate, they went to satellite imagery, and so long as that application was equal, they just didn't target this one guy.
Sure,
probably permitted. Again, I don't know what state it was, but
Texas, that one.
Texas, okay. So yeah, I would imagine so long as it wasn't selective enforcement, preferential treatment, targeting, meaning the board member has a shed, their buddies have a shed, and all of a sudden they're dropping the axe on this guy. That would
has to be universal.
That would have been very problematic.
Sure.
Yeah.
But if it was more universal in nature, I mean, it sounds sensational, right? In the sense that they went to a satellite to leveraging NASA technology to figure this out. So long as it was an equal application of the law, it was likely permitted.
I'm excited for this Disney next piece. Let's see.
You walk into the mouse's house, you play by the mouse's rules. And if you step out of line, Goofy is allowed to break your knees. And the existence of HOAs is something that many local governments actually appreciate. Cash-strapped municipalities like them because developers build roads and parks and pass the costs along to the homeowners. In fact, many municipalities even mandate the creation of HOAs in new residential developments, which might be why the rise of HOAs has been called the most significant privatisation of local government responsibilities in recent times.
Okay, wait, I have never thought about that. They pass on all of those financial burdens on the homeowners.
It's a huge cost-saving measure. Massive.
Never actually thought about that. That is fascinating.
Yeah.
And they have laws that that force HOAs. Is that what he was saying?
I would have to look at the law that he's referring to. It's either they incentivize, they encourage, or public policy favors, or it's actually mandated. If you're going to develop a huge plot of land, it has to be under the umbrella of an association.
Yeah, I could see
One or
something
the
like
other.
that in Ladera.
Oh, 100%.
Important point here, because HOAs can have the authority of a government and collect fees and fines like one, but when it comes to accountability, they can actively resist it in ways that government officials could only dream about.
This is where
After the residents of one HOA in Arizona posted some social media comments about an upcoming board election, the HOA demanded that they remove posts that were critical of its board and threatened to fine them as much as $250 a day if they didn't. And while they eventually walked that back, that is a pretty striking level of hostility toward basic scrutiny, even before you learn that this is how one board member dealt with press inquiries as the story unfolded.
I gotta ask you. No, I'm sorry, but you have a lot of. No, you've got.
Get away from me!
That's
Oh, we got a tyrant on our hands.
Val Vista Lakes Board Director Todd McCoy following a private board meeting tonight in Gilbert. After being shoved, we reiterated to McCoy that the community was very upset, to which he replied,
Handling the situation right now.
Holy shit! He came at that reporter with the fire of 1,000 Mel Gibsons. There is almost no scenario where yelling, "Get away from me," that aggressively is called for, aside from maybe bumping into Ezra Miller in Hawaii. And at this point, you probably won't be surprised to learn that private associations designed to have the force of law in suburban neighbourhoods have a history of being used to exclude certain groups. As we discussed in our housing discrimination piece, many neighbourhoods had racial covenants barring the sale of housing to black Americans, and in some cases, HOAs tried to enforce those covenants even after the Supreme Court ruled them unconstitutional. But even today, there are cases where HOAs are used to actively exclude certain types of residents. Just last June, the board of the Providence HOA in Denton County, Texas, which oversees a community made up of 2,200 homes, passed a rule that would ban renting a house to anyone using a publicly financed or subsidized housing program such as Section 8. And the impacts of that were immediate.
Provincia Threat fears being homeless soon. That's because the rules have changed in their Providence Village subdivision.
I sit in my living room and cry because I just don't know what to do.
Now, that is terrible, but it's not just her. That new rule threatened to displace more than 150 families renting in the neighbourhood, with black families making up 93% of those households. And I know that those HOA officials might not think of themselves as racists, but 93% is a pretty solid A for racism. That HOA's policy is now under investigation, but the fact is there is nothing in state or federal law that explicitly forbids HOAs from enacting bans like this. It's basically a segregation loophole, which, by the way, would be a pretty good slogan for the suburbs. And if you're thinking, well, this all seems f***ed up, but thank God there aren't private companies making this worse. Hold on, I've got some bad news. Because at this point, we should probably...
Wait, briefly, though, you know, they're talking about these... race restrictions, you know, to the extent that a board is insane enough to attempt that, you know, the impacted party could go absolutely nuclear on the HOA. I mean, the HOA is just setting themselves up for a bloodbath. In the side that favors the homeowner. So, you know, it's painted out that HOAs do this, but they do that at such a high level of risk of just being absolutely annihilated in court.
Well, and we have like our own federal protections against this
Correct.
kind of behavior.
Correct. Correct.
Like our literal civil rights.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, and that trumps all.
So in other words, the HOAs are acting outside of the law.
Correct.
Simple as that.
Correct.
Let me discuss management companies. You see, while, as I mentioned, all the big decision-making in HOAs is done by elected boards of homeowners, they may not have the time or skills to do everything running an HOA entails, or they may not want to get their hands dirty policing their neighbours. That is why the majority of HOAs hire professional companies to handle their day-to-day needs under the board's direction. Here is how one of the biggest, Associa, pitches itself.
The people who serve on our boards are volunteers, and for most of them, they have other full-time jobs. So our role is to come alongside them and help do the heavy lifting of what it takes to manage that neighborhood that they may not have the time for or the expertise for. Our role is really to help them achieve that vision.
Yeah, firsthand, I can say management companies often just are the accelerator on problems. And a bad HOA can just become that much worse through a bad management company. It's absolutely insane. It's like pouring gasoline on a fire, on a dumpster fire. Specifically a dumpster fire. It's like a bad management company, a bad board, perfect combination for disaster.
Now, in theory, that sounds pretty good, doesn't it? But in practice, it can get much messier than that. Remember Ted, who was getting his bench taken away? His neighborhood was run by Associa. So if all they want to do is help a neighborhood achieve a vision, as long as that vision includes Ted doesn't get to sit down, I guess mission accomplished. The problem is, when you introduce for-profit companies to find problems in your neighborhood, things can change fast. Many of these management companies have people whose job it is to drive around neighborhoods looking for infractions. If you look at that letter that Ted got regarding his bench, you'll see that it says the infraction was noted by the Associa Arizona inspection team. And just watch as one woman explains just how quickly things snowballed after a new management company took over her HOA.
First, the HOA told her trash cans couldn't be visible from the street.
You have to turn your head so far over like this to see it for the second that you are passing my house.
So she moved them inside.
Which is very hard to get them in and out.
Then the problem was her hose.
It was, all wrapped up. So it really didn't look bad.
Then it was her lawn art.
Can't have those.
Then they wanted her to power wash her house and sweep up her driveway. But when she didn't get it done fast enough, she got late fees on top of late fees. $25 a day for each infraction.
These are things that are so incidental, they're not important. They're asinine. And you're charging me $17,000?
$17,000? That is clearly ridiculous. I adore everything about that woman, including her world-class delivery of asinine. Although, I will say, I do think she could do a little bit better with her lawn art. It's not
I was going to defend her lawn art. I thought it was charming.
It's just a bit of a waste when she could have something spectacular like these ducks wearing boots or these ducks made of bananas. Your lawn is a canvas, Pat. Fill it with whatever duck art speaks to you. The point is, this is a system that can quickly trap people in a vicious cycle of debt. Here's how it works. Let's say you fall behind on HOA payments. You might be charged interest and have to pay additional penalties, but that is just the beginning here. Because once the management company starts pursuing payment, they can involve lawyers whose fees can be astronomical and things can get out of hand fast. Here is the bill of just one 88-year-old homeowner in Texas. She fell ill and was in a nursing home, so she missed an annual dues payment at the start of 2021 of $423. Her HOA then started charging interest and fees for missed payments, and just 5 months later, her bill was already up to $682. But things really started escalating when lawyers' fees started getting introduced, because there are a lot of them. And over the course of just 2 years, she suddenly owed over $8,000, well over half of which was lawyers' fees. And if you're wondering why lawyers are even getting involved here, it's because they often come in when HOAs are ready to exercise a truly incredible power that they have over homeowners, which this woman found out about the hard way.
There was a process server who came and knocked on my door and served me with a foreclosure notice. And of course...
So briefly on this is where it really becomes problematic and troublesome, because, you start to accrue fines, fees, whatever it is, you fall behind. But in some situations, what the HOA will do is they'll turn it over to a debt collecting lawyer. And the debt collecting lawyer will actually get a percentage of what they end up collecting. So the danger becomes you have a debt collector attorney come in who gets hyper aggressive, and they realize to an extent that maybe there's equity within the home. Maybe there's $200,000 in equity, $300,000. They'll go so far to actually file a lawsuit for the breach of contract or the fines due and owing, which is breach of contract. But they'll tack on, before that, they'll file a lien on the property, and they'll attempt to foreclose on the property. So now you have an attorney who's incentivized to take it all the way to jury trial or bench trial, whatever it is, because
they're going to get a part of
yes,
even though it well exceeds.
Correct.
That is unbelievable.
It's awful, and that really adds additional fuel to the fire. But it also incentivizes an attorney who's just churning the file because they're hoping to get paid out from the equity of the property. So you can see how these situations
100%.
snowball where you have a ton of self-interest driving it behind the scenes.
Is there any laws, I mean, specifically, I guess we're talking about you're in California, but is there any laws that protect on how many fees can be generated by an HOA?
Well, again, that goes to the CC&Rs. And what you don't necessarily slot it in by way of laws protecting specific fines, right? If there's an outstanding violation and it's $75 a day, the issue that we typically see is the accounting. They don't provide an accounting, or the accounting is just wrong. So there's a number of ways to challenge these sort of fees or this overreaching. But the trick is you have to get out in front of it immediately. I mean, we had one client recently who she was renting out her property. At the end of 2 years, she received a $60,000 bill. No notice.
Jeez.
Never got notice.
That's crazy.
Because the board had her email on file, had her home address on file, her mailing address, but never sent notice to her. They sent it to the tenant. The tenant didn't care. I mean, the tenant was like, "This isn't my business," threw it away. The tenant probably should have forwarded it to the homeowner or client, but did not do so.
But didn't have their name on it either.
Correct. So we came in aggressively, and it was a failure to notify. We had no idea. Our client had no idea genuinely that there was any sort of outstanding violation, that this fee was accruing. The board made no attempt to notify the client. So we were able to, come in very strategically and knock off the fines, knock off the entire amount because notice requirements were not met. So there are ways to strategically come in and knock these to the side, right? But you have to really know how to leverage the law in that sense. And typically it goes into the CC&Rs, whether or not there is an overreach. If there is an overreach, to leverage that against the HOA. I mean, you have power, but you got to know what that power is first and foremost. Otherwise, you're going to get railroaded, and you're going to end up in a situation where you have a greedy lawyer on the other side trying to take your house or take the equity from the house.
That's wild.
It is.
First, I freaked out.
Maisha had fallen behind on a lot of her bills, but she said she'd work something out with the mortgage company.
But this was the HOA, and I had no idea that an HOA could foreclose on you.
It's true. HOAs can foreclose on your home, which is one of those things that sounds ridiculous but is absolutely true. Like how there are 4 times as many chickens as people on Earth, or Lenny Kravitz is Al Roker's second cousin, or
I did not know
the first
that.
song Charlie Puth ever masturbated to was This Love by Maroon 5. That's a true fact, and I hate that I know it, but I love that you now know it too. And this power gets deployed all over the country. Colorado's HOAs alone filed more than 2,400 foreclosure cases from January 2018 to February of last year. And
I bet you if you pulled up those lawsuits, it's debt collection attorneys driving those. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
That's interesting.
Because again, they're incentivized.
Because they're incentivized.
It makes sense for them on a business
self-interest level.
Because they're talking
self-interest level, yeah.
They're talking maybe a few $1,000s in fines, but that can turn into look how much equity we got.
Cash grab.
My goodness.
make matters worse, those homes can then be sold at auction, sometimes without the homeowner even realizing. Just listen to this woman explain how, despite
Okay, legally, again, I'm not talking about Colorado law. In California, there's two ways to foreclose on a property. You have non-judicial and judicial. If it's non-judicial, you essentially have to follow a series of notices, putting the homeowner on notice that they're going to foreclose, but it works off this timeline. So there's always notification with non-judicial. And then with judicial foreclosures, you have to get personally served. So I'm curious to see what he's about to say.
Desperately trying to pay her late HOA fees, she wound up losing everything.
Walked in, paid him the $2,700, and when I walked out, I said, "This is all I owe, right?" Yes.
Get that in writing.
Then here comes the next set of letters, and now it's up to $6,400.
Turns out there were post-judgment legal fees and 18% back interest. So even after she'd paid more than $9,000, she was still somehow behind on her dues. But in 2018, she received the most shocking letter of all, an eviction notice.
You know, you lose your home. That's hard.
But sadness turned to anger when she realized the HOA had purchased her home through foreclosure for $3.24 a year before she was evicted.
That happened. They bought her whole house for $3.24. And losing your home alone is horrifying, but seeing it sold for so little is genuinely insulting.
That's insane.
Because $3.24 is significantly less than what it costs to buy just one of those banana ducks. They cost $17.89, and the reason I know that is I bought one, and yes, I too was surprised by how small it is.
I thought they were bigger.
Less surprised than I was to learn that it technically costs more than someone's entire house. Most states don't even require HOAs to offer a payment.
Yeah, I mean, that one, honestly, that could have been just behind the scenes, dirty foreclosure, no notices.
There's for sure more
surprised.
information that we're not getting.
No, I don't. Listen, I never come to the table trusting an HOA ever. And I'm never surprised to see the level of misconduct and the ruthlessness behind the scenes.
That's
We
so
see it all the time.
disappointing.
It's horrible. You know, his outrage over this, I mean, I know it's in jest and it's part of his act, but I mean, it's justified. It's absolutely horrific.
It said something that the HOA themselves purchased
the
it for
house.
$324. So
How?
isn't that like a conflict of interest?
No, I mean, listen, if all the legal requirements are checked off, right? They check all the boxes, cross the T's, dot the lowercase J's. You know, the HOA, the association can come in as a bona fide purchaser for value.
That's insane.
Yeah, that's interesting that the HOA themselves can purchase a distressed property that they caused distress to in the first place. How is that not a conflict of interest?
Yeah, on this one, on her situation, you may have been able to challenge that along the lines that notices were never actually properly given. You know, there are ways to unwind a foreclosure or challenge it after the fact. Again, that would take a deep dive into her situation.
I would love to deep dive into that case at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think where was that one out of Colorado?
I didn't see.
Yeah, I didn't see either. So I don't know. Maybe
now, and she paid it. She claims she paid it all off. She should have had that easily in writing or had someone represent.
You know what was interesting though? I thought I caught that it said post judgment interest.
It did.
So for me, what that suggests is that lawsuit was filed. Maybe it went to default. She never actually defended the lawsuit, because when a lawsuit's filed against, again, California, but when you get hit with a lawsuit, you have to respond within a certain amount of time, statutory period. If you do not respond within that statutory period, you receive a notice of default, and then there's a default proving hearing. So the attorney will show up to the court, essentially prove up the case in front of the judge, but there's no opposition. There's no one to challenge that. So what happened here likely is it was defaulted, but part of the default was a foreclosure action. And so maybe that's how this shook out on the back end. Now, the fact that she went and she said she paid, I don't know who she paid, but whenever you satisfy any sort of debt, outstanding debt,
that in writing.
In writing, and one of the best ways to do it is just to write an email to whoever you pay. It's like, Dear Susie at Management Company, here's my $5,000 check. This settles everything, in full.
Please confirm.
Yes.
If this is not accurate, please respond back in writing. You put the burden on them to respond in writing.
Interesting. That's good advice.
Yeah.
I like that.
So, or you can fax it too. I like faxes. You get a fax confirmation sheet.
What's that?
No one faxes.
Exactly.
I miss fax machines.
Before taking legal action against a homeowner. And the reason for that is simple. Remember, HOAs are private organisations. That means that the nation's 350,000 HOAs are largely unregulated, and the government sees any disputes as private matters. The California AG's office says that it does not handle most homeowners associations' complaints. The Texas Secretary of State says that no state agency regulates home or property owners associations. And the New York State AG says in most cases there is no government agency that can help unhappy homeowners who are having problems with their homeowner.
Yeah, I mentioned this before, though. I mean, your recourse is court.
Yeah.
It's civil action. The government doesn't typically get involved with private affairs. And I use this example. If you lend someone $1 million and they don't pay you back, you don't go to the AG's office. Unless there is a nuance to that. If it was criminal in nature, I mean, there's some, sort of exceptions to that rule. But in general, that is a breach of contract between private parties. The AG isn't going to spend resources necessarily on that. Similarly, these are governed by contractual relationships amongst parties, the governing documents. So it is private in nature.
And I hate to say it, but most of the complaints that they've portrayed in this so far are probably clearly laid out in the CC&Rs, and they're violating them. And even if it sounds ticky tacky, it's clear as day in there, and they have to enforce them across the board.
What I sort of wish the angle on this was to actually identify the really bad acting HOAs, the ones that are just horrific, that are dumpster fires. I mean, what they're identifying, it's. You can use your little thing, your bullshit, when you say bullshit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
It's BS. It's ticky-tacky, like you said. But you know what? It sounds like this was laid out in the CC&Rs. But, the real problems that we see, I mean, with the selective enforcement, preferential treatment, you're talking about real bad actors, really bad HOAs that are actually going out of their way to target. Now, the foreclosure one may have been that case.
Sure.
That could have been some very shady dealings, and that wouldn't surprise me at all with an HOA.
The $3.24 sold to the HOA seems somewhat suspect.
So that was the first one that really, raises a lot of red flags. And with HOAs where there's smoke, there's typically, I've said this before, a dumpster fire behind the scenes. And so, on this one, this is a lot of ticky-tacky stuff, the bench on a common area. Okay, I'm not surprised that the HOA lost it over that. But maybe, I don't know, maybe he gets into some of the more sensational cases.
Homeowners Association adding good luck, which is basically just a cute way to say, you washed her hair and put on a little church dress. And if after all of this you're thinking, well, I have learned my lesson, I will never buy a house in an HOA, remember, over 80% of new homes that are sold come with one. Also, you might not know that you are dealing with a bad HOA until it is too late, as in most places, you aren't legally required to be granted access to all of its rules until after your offer to buy a home is accepted, which seems a bit weird, doesn't it? If your HOA can...
So the vast majority of CC&Rs are now online, so it's not hard to get. And before you acquire a property, you can absolutely make an ask, you can make a request. Hey, can we see the CC&Rs? I would like that as part of my, investigation of the property. If the seller says, no, we're not going to turn anything over, and everyone's super cagey, that might be a red flag.
Sorry, I was wondering if there's in California, is there laws that it has to be public?
The actual CC&Rs, do they have to make it public? Most are public, most are available. I can't identify any specific law that there's a mandatory publication of the CC&Rs offhand.
But if you want to buy the house, and they're not willing to give it up, then
I think that's a problem.
Huge red flag.
Yeah, but I don't know if there's any law that you can actually leverage to compel or force, and compel them to turn it over.
Sure.
Backyard from space. You should probably be able to see your HOA documents before you sign. And look, I'm not saying that all HOAs should immediately be gone. For a start, some people do like theirs. And besides, right now, local governments just aren't equipped to suddenly take over the services like trash collection or maintenance that they provide. But at the very least, states should be looking for ways to avoid the worst possible outcome for homeowners who simply find themselves in a tough spot, like mandating HOAs offer payment plans on unpaid debt before they take legal action, and banning foreclosures based solely on fines and attorney's fees. Because at their best, HOAs are annoying student council adults telling you to trim your shrubs and move your trash cans. But at their worst, they are glorified debt collectors with the power to upend your life and expel people from a neighborhood. And at absolute minimum, from now on, HOA should probably be forced to be much clearer with people about what they are potentially getting themselves into.
All right, so that was, well, thank you, Marty, for bringing that to my attention. I guess ultimate takeaway, it was meant to somewhat be lighthearted. I mean, they're casting a horrible light on an HOA, but I think very rightfully. On a serious note, bad HOAs absolutely destroy homeownership. They do. I mean, they make someone's life an absolute living hell. And again, I really wish that they would have focused on more of the egregious stuff. But even the ticky-tacky stuff, I get where they're coming from. Just that over-scrutinizing of a neighborhood, just indebting people, right? Hitting them with fines every other day over minimal stuff. It can be a horrible situation. And I think they did a decent job shedding light on some of the
that was well done.
Yeah, I thought it was quite funny. So thank you, Marty, for bringing that to our attention.
I'm glad I couldn't help.
All right, so thanks for watching. And if you have comments or feedback, please leave them in the comment box below. But otherwise, thanks for watching.